was 17 years old. I just finished my A-levels in Pakistan at the time when I went off to university in the United States. And it was kind of sort of expected that if I did reasonably well in my exams, I would go abroad to study. So I left Lahore and moved to the United States and really to study engineering,
Right.
which is what I did. And then I worked as an engineer before going to business school and then switching careers completely. I was working as an engineer in Chicago and initially actually literally working and on a giant tunneling machine, digging these tunnels under the city of Chicago. And then for me, there was a fork in the road whether I wanted to continue and do a master's in engineering or did I want to try something very different and broader.
Yeah.
And I ended up, for a whole host of reasons, deciding to go and study business at the Kellogg School. And that's where the big epiphany for me was. And it was in some ways quite accidental because I thought that I would go into banking initially. And ends up that I ended up actually going in to see Procter & Gamble, who had invited me to interview with them. And I thought it would be a good initial interview to prepare me for others. But as I spoke to P&G, we just had a really, really interesting conversation and they kept inviting me back for further and further interviews and never looked back since. And what I loved about it, what eventually was, in this world that I'm in, you get a report card every week and that's called your weekly sales report. So it's in so many ways the greatest democracy on earth because you know how many consumers are either voting for you or for your competition, literally by what the sales numbers are. So no matter how smart you may think you are, it's a very humbling experience when ideas that you worked on for weeks or months, and in some cases even years, don't pan out. There are two things that connect it. The first one is I've been very curious for a long, long time in my life. And if you look at the common thread in terms of the choices I've made, it's really been driven by curiosity. The desire to learn something or learn something more deeply than I already knew or learn something completely different. There's the second thing, and this was the two big things that I learned at business school, beyond the subject matters that one studies, Andy. For me, it was really two things if I look back. One was I learned a tolerance for ambiguity. In effect, if you will, the uncertainty of certainty, okay? And that for me was a massive aha, and it has continued to be with me to this day. How do you deal with ambiguity and still function? How do you still make decisions despite ambiguity? And that was one of the great things that I learned. And the other one was to really understand and frame the question you want the answer to. Because many times you go down rabbit holes and you think you've got the right question, but in fact, we're not quite asking precisely the question that we need to. I'm a very, very fortunate person, honestly, to have come here when I did. I count myself very lucky. Pladis is a fabulous company. I mean, there's not many companies where you come in and you have this breadth of brands. You've mentioned McVitie's. We have Ülker in Turkey and the Middle East. We have brands like Hobnobs. We have Bain in France, Fracade in the Netherlands. So fabulous brands. That's just to name a few. So it's not often that you get to be the custodian of these brands that were built by great people that came before us. Yeah. It's a business that's growing. We've brought together, as I said, these different businesses. We're working on cultural integration. All these businesses come from different backgrounds, different paradigms, and we've been working on building what we call a one Pladis vision, a one Pladis culture. We're well on our way with that. And therefore, the businesses are performing well. They're all growing in the right direction, and we are incredibly optimistic about our future. Right. So I think job number one is to continue to grow nicely in the markets that we are in.
Right.
If you look at those, many of our major markets would include the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Netherlands, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, India, to name just a few. Kazakhstan would be another one, Romania. So those are, if you would, some of our markets that we are in, and we have very healthy positions there. Yeah. So job number one is to continue to grow there. And we are actively looking both at entering new categories in those current markets, as well as potentially looking at new markets as well. But the one thing I can promise you, we are going at it very methodically in a way that we think our consumers will prefer and our ability to succeed in those. To me, a brand is a promise.
Yes.
And a good brand is good as long as it delivers what it promises its consumers. And that for me is the essence of what a brand stands for. So to the degree that I've been fortunate enough to work on all kinds of brands, and I've truly been very, very lucky with that, it always has been, how do I deliver on the essence of the promise that I'm making to my consumers? I wouldn't say to you that you have to be either big or small. I think the game goes to those who are agile.
Right.
And agility is what I'm looking for. So to me, we are not in a world where the small won't survive. I think the small will thrive.
Yeah.
If you look at the amount of innovation and startups that come up in the food and beverage world is one example of that. They do well and they prosper because they're agile and they have fabulous insights and they build and deliver great products. So I think there's a role for businesses as long as they're agile, regardless of their size. Because, this is, you remember I spoke to consumer products being a terrific democracy, right?
Yeah.
What that means is you keep your brands relevant and you keep them differentiated. And if you keep a brand relevant and differentiated, it will prosper. And so the monopoly is really about the monopoly of ideas.
Right.
How do you think about brands in a way that consumers will say, yeah, that speaks to me today? And how do you come up with ideas? They'll say, wow, that's different than what I've tried before. And that's why this is a game that rewards agility and it rewards good ideas and creativity, because that's what drives and creates value. Imagination is only limited by the size of our own limits that we place upon ourselves. I've seen large corporations be incredibly nimble when you have people who don't place limits on themselves.
Right.
And I see small companies thrive because they say we have nothing to fear but failure itself.
Right.
And so they go forward. So to me, it's all about the imagination that resides within us. And that's why the hunt for talent is such an important piece of it. Finding folks who can think through agility, who don't fear failure, who don't fear trying different things. I think it's essential. I think a diverse and inclusive company will almost always deliver superior business results. You don't have to take my word for it. There have been a number of studies that have been done that when boards and management teams and managers are made up of diverse individuals in an inclusive company where diversity of ideas is welcomed, where it's a way of thinking,
yeah,
those businesses always prosper economically. So I think the case for doing what's right, because I believe we are better when we resemble the populations that we serve. And we are better because we understand those populations better than to deliver better results. Where I would start would be with this idea of inclusion.
Yeah.
I think building an inclusive culture in a company is the single biggest unlock because it transcends everything else. It makes us all better. When we learn to listen, really listen and not just hear people, when we reach out to ask people, what is it that you truly meant? We listen to what is not said. That is part of being an inclusive culture. When we bring people in from diverse backgrounds, from diverse educational backgrounds, from diverse life experiences, we learn something from folks. That is an inclusive culture. For me, everything starts with inclusion. And if we build the right inclusive culture, that's when diversity of all kinds gets welcomed and becomes part of the DNA of an organization. Yeah. So my focus, my philosophy has been, how do I go on this journey of inclusivity, which then drives the right diversity? And get it to a point where it becomes part of who we really are
Yeah.
as a culture. I think the Asian community has done a fabulous job as a community and as individuals in the UK. I see it go from strength to strength. And I think it's exactly because the community as a whole is agile.
Yeah.
It understands who it serves, who it exists to serve. They're very clear. They take calculated risks. They build business models that are differentiated. And they're enormously, enormously close to their consumers. They know intrinsically what their consumer is looking for. Happy Diwali. Enjoy your families. Talk to them no matter how close or far they are. Smile a lot and enjoy each other's warm embrace.